Hi, everyone. This is Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB5AN. Thank you for taking time to join us on today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing our Crestwind Rocky River Rural EB5 project, and we've got the pleasure of having Kumar from India, one of our recent EB5 investors in this project, with us to share some information about his experience going through the EB5 program, hiring an attorney, and why he ended up choosing the Crestwind Rocky River EB5 rural project. So thank you for making time to join us today. To start out, could you share a little bit of information about your background, what brought you to the US originally, and then what kind of motivated you to explore EB5 as a next step for you and your family?
Hi guys, so as Sam just mentioned, I'm originally from India. I came to the US almost 11 years ago, first as a student, and then after graduating with a master's, I started working in a company here, and I've been working ever since. So that's almost 11 years now.
Got it. And so, having been here for over a decade, what kind of motivated you to decide to seriously look at EB5 versus just continuing on, on the path that you were on?
Right. So as a part of working on, so I forgot to mention, but when you work, you kind of have to apply for work visa, which is the H-1B lottery, as a lot of you probably know. And as a part of the H-1B lottery, you can apply for permanent residency through the employment-based immigration program, right? So that's what's called the EB1, EB2, EB3 kind of categories where your company applies for a green card for you. So for me, I think what happened is my EB2 petition, which is the employment-based second priority category, was approved in around 2018. But if you're aware that the immigration system has caps on, like there's a country cap, which means they don't give more than a certain number of visas per country. So for India, that is like very much backlog. So right now so my priority date was not current, and it would have taken a very long time to become current. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to pursue the EB5 path. I did think of there are some other paths like a EB2 to EB1 porting path, but there are some downsides to it. Like for instance, that itself is a multi-year process, building up all that evidence, and it also ties you down to the same employer because you need your employer to also sponsor that.
Got it. Okay. So more flexibility and clear path to remaining permanently in the US without having any restrictions.
Correct. Great point there, because as you said, so the H-1B, like every time it gets renewed, there's a period where it kind of restricts your travel before having that visa stamp. So you have to go to a consulate and get that renewed, and that can take some time because sometimes a lot of the consulates are like out of appointments. So that's one constraint which kind of like it reduces your flexibility. And the other important point is that if you lose your job on an H-1B, you only have 60 days to figure out another job, and that's actually quite low, because if you've seen some of the tech layoffs that are going on, it doesn't even matter if you're necessarily a great performer, but if your company has like a bad quarter, a couple of bad quarters, they're gonna just lay off, let's say, an entire department that they don't think is profitable or something like that, and you can come under you can be in a situation where you have a 60-day period where you have to look for a job and the market just isn't good enough. So this kind of gives you that that safety net as well. So that was what I was considering.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So once you've done the research, you kind of came to the conclusion that EB5 is going to be the best path forward. What was your next step at that point in terms of starting to research attorneys and walk us through kind of how you approached researching and ultimately hiring the attorney that you used to help put together your application?
Sure. So what I did was initially I just started looking over what are my options available, right? And I found that, as I said, the EB to EB1 porting wasn't good enough. So I said, okay, let's look at the EB5 program. And what I saw, I really liked what I saw, right? Is that there's multiple, even within the EB5 program, there's like a direct way of investing, and there's more of a passive way of investing through a regional center, and where you can kind of make an investment that that funds some like funds projects, right, in urban and or rural areas. So I did like a deep research reading the government, like the act that was passed originally, and then the Reform and Integrity Act that was passed in 2022. So I did some of the background on that. Your Sam, I went through your site and a bunch of other sites that are out there to kind of confirm and better understand it, because the law is sometimes it's quite like difficult to understand without having some supplemental articles on it. So that was very
Yep.
helpful. And as soon as I got as I went through that, I said that this option makes a lot of sense for those who can invest this amount. uh, and also another thing that played a part in that was uh, the priority dates for the country of origin, like India and almost all other countries, is current. So that's where I kind of started, and I can go in more details of uh, like how the rural and the urban projects, how I decided between those, and yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in a few minutes. I guess before we jump to the project questions, let's just kind of share what was important for you as you started talking to different attorneys. How many different attorneys did you interview, and ultimately who did you end up hiring, and why did you end up hiring them?
Okay, so I end up talking to around 5 attorneys, and they were already whittled down from a bigger list. So I'd I'd searched multiple places online on who are the attorneys that are working, and then kind of shortened that list. And then I spoke to each of them individually, trying to understand how many EB5 clients do they have? Is it like do they do per year, right? So that I want to get an idea of what kind of volume they process, because that gives you an idea of, because the immigration and USCIS based, there's a lot of there's a back and forth even between you and the attorney, and the attorney and you with USCIS, because occasionally USCIS might send an RFE, which is a request for evidence, and the attorney, an experienced attorney, will be able to deal with it much better. I know that from personal experience, because um, in my job I work with a very famous like immigration attorney. But the downsides of a very big immigration attorney is you don't get personalized attention. So those were two of my factors, right? One is a little bit of personalized attention for my case, someone who cares about the case, and the second is someone who does a good amount of volume, so that they can uh, see the issues and be able to answer them quickly. And yeah, that was my. And finally, so after speaking to the short list, I decided to go with Anahita George. It was great experience working with her, and yeah, I
And
definitely recommend working with her. Yeah.
And what do you think, having just gone through that documentation process recently with Anita, what do you think made that experience just better than it would have been had you hired, a different attorney? Like what made that easier, and how was that experience?
So I think I can probably put it down to 2 points. One is how streamlined the approach was, where after I contacted her and said, hey, let's get started on this, just the use of technology, and like a Dropbox account, upload your documentation with a certain number of years, very quick turnaround time and responsiveness. Because what I also found, which kind of affected my decision making while selecting the attorney, was how responsive they are, right? Like sometimes if you send an email to someone, if you hear back within 4 or 5 days, That means either they're caught up with too much, or maybe that's their standard response time. And I was looking for faster response time because I did want to get this done quickly. So because you never know, right? Again, the reason why I want to do it quickly is because the priority dates are current today, but may not remain so in the future, right? So time is of the essence. Now, apart from the streamlining stuff, once I uploaded that, I used to get an acknowledgement back saying, hey, received your documents, this is good, this is missing. And I thought that was great. And any questions that I had and continue to have, I found like the response to be very quick and detailed. And yeah, I just sense like a great personal care with Anahita. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Perfect. And how, like, once you did hire her and you started working on the application, how long was it from that first back and forth with documents to your application being completed and ready to submit?
So that was, I think, I can't put an exact number to, but it was like 2-3 weeks. Not it wasn't too long after that.
Okay.
Within 2. Okay. So we worked really fast on it. Yeah.
Okay. And so, just in summary, before we move on to another topic, like what, if you were talking to another friend, in a similar position on H-1B in the US considering EB-5, what advice would you have for them if, they asked you, hey, what would you recommend I look for or consider when looking for an EB-5 attorney to help?
My response would be do your research and hire Anahita anyway. But just kidding, right? Jokes aside, I think you have to think of this is because of the process, right? When you understand the process, you realize it's a multi-year kind of relationship, right? So there's the application, then after that there's like a removal of conditions and any RFEs, anything that comes in between, right? So you have to treat it as that. So you want to make sure that it's someone who has seen a lot of cases, has a lot of personal experience with this program, and they can guide you through the documentation and like fast and responsive, and their process itself is streamlined, right? So I would say that again, a multi-year relationship. So see if you can work with this person over the long term, right? And then check for the responsiveness, how quickly they're getting back to you, and just inquire more about what their volume is and like how many clients have they served in the past year. Those would be 3 things to get started on, for sure.
Perfect. Okay. And just one other question on that. Just in terms, since you did interview 4 or 5 other attorneys, what was your sense in terms of cost? Would you say that Anahita was about the average of the other ones, higher, lower, and how did kind of attorney cost fit into your decision in terms of which attorney to hire?
So I think I would say it was a little bit on the higher side compared to the others. But I think with any such cases, my experience has been you kind of get what you pay for. So you don't want to, if someone's offering like a very low price on it, that means either they don't have the experience because they're not aware of what level of work that'll involve, or it might not be a great quality job that they might do. So I think because the investment amount is so large, right? It's like 800, and for urban it's more than $1 million. You don't want to skimp or try to, because this is a relatively short amount. So I think you should try to get the best level of legal representation you can get with USCIS, because this is again this application is reviewed over a period of months, so it can't have like mistakes. It has to be as perfect as you can send it out.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's shift gears and chat a bit about projects. So maybe first, since you mentioned urban versus rural, maybe tell us a little bit about what your research was in terms of understanding urban versus rural, and kind of why you decided to pursue rural, and then and then let's kind of talk about some specific project differences.
Right. So what I was looking for was when I started the research, I realized that there's urban projects that you can invest in, and there's rural kind of projects that you can invest in, and across different sectors, right? So that can be like real estate developments in like apartments, you can have hotels, ski resorts, all that kind of stuff, right? One of the things that really played a key part in my decision was the RIA Act of 2022 specifically states that rural projects get priority processing. That's different from premium processing, which is like the H1 in the H1B world. That's a 15 calendar day processing time, but rural projects are prioritized over urban projects in terms of USCIS processing. So that played a key role in shifting towards rural, because I felt like it looked like urban projects might take a lot longer in terms of like USCIS reviewing the application. So that was a key decision there.
Got it. Okay, so once you'd kind of done some research and decided, okay, I definitely want to do a rural project with faster processing, greater visa set aside, all of that, and obviously the lower $800,000 investment amount. So then, what was your process like in terms of looking at 6, 7, 8 different rural projects? What did you go to Google, type in rural project, and then chat with the different teams? Like what did that kind of research process look like?
Right. So I'd already come up with like a list of projects when I was doing my initial research that I was aware of, like the hotels, resorts, apartment complexes. So I did send out, each of these sites have like a contact us kind of form. So I did send them an email, say, hey, can you give me some more information about each of these projects? And almost everyone like happily responded, and I was given like prospectus documents to review that I kind of went over, right? And based on all that, I can walk you through my decision process. I had like a set of criteria that I used to evaluate the projects by, and after I did that, I think I finally decided to select Rocky River. And I can happy to go through the criteria if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
All right. So I think one of the first criteria I was looking at was who is the developer of the project, and what is the regional center, and who are the major players of this particular project, right? What is their track record? That was important to me, right? Have they successfully executed such projects in the past, or is this like one of their first or second projects? So that was the experience or the tenure. That was one factor that was pretty important to me. The second was, and these are not, I mean, there's no order of ranking here really, but the macros of the project, right? Like for example, let's say in a rural project, which is kind of the rural is coming from the census data, right? So I want to understand how far is it from like a major city, right? And like who are the people who are the target demographic that will kind of come there? Like, is it vacationers? Is it like older people? Is it children? That kind of stuff. So I was interested in veterans. That who is this project serving? So that was another sub criteria, right, for the macros. And then what is the status of the project? Is it something that's almost complete? Is it something that's just starting? And I'll speak more to the state of the project later as well. Then the capital stack of that particular project, right? How is it funded and like financed? How is the construction done for that, right? And how are the revenues generated? That's another sub criteria, which is it on a rolling basis, or is it that the entire construction has to complete before even a single dollar can come in? So there were aspects of that. Was it leased by is there a government involved here? So there were some factors like that involved. And the third criteria was the EB5 program requires that you create like 10 jobs over a period of 2 years, right? So I'd suggest that people read up on what are the types of jobs that need to be created. So please do your research there and try to understand the RIMS model and all that's involved there, especially for the rural stuff. And you'll see that the job creation is the important part, because you can get a conditional green card, but if the job creation isn't met, you will never be able to satisfy the removal of conditions. So that's a very important part of it. So you want to see if your project will be able to generate those jobs, right? And another factor was which phase of the project it is, right? I think I talked about that. And the reason why I said was a project that's initial stages, that has just started and has received, let's say, the 956F approval, which Rocky River has. Chances are your job creation is going to be satisfied, because any construction job, especially initially, is going to be very intensive, right? So there's a lot of jobs getting created in like the initial period and future phases as well. Yeah, so those were some of the.
Let's circle back to the first 2 points that you raised. So, the parties involved, the developer, right, and then the macros and the underlying business. So, compared to some of the other projects that you looked at, what made this project appealing in terms of the developer and the macros and the underlying business?
Right. So I can try to connect what I just said, right? So Coulter, I found that in my own research, I found that they have a successful record of executing these kind of projects, right? And they've been doing this, so it's not like a first or second project. They've done like multiple such projects in the past. One of the most famous ones is the Twin Lakes project, right? So and this particular project, the Crestwind community project, it was something that is completed in phases. It's not done as in like the revenues can start coming in after each phase, which means once you build a few homes, that those homes can be sold and then the revenues essentially are being generated. Whereas when I looked at some of the other projects, like a hotel or like a travel resort or something like that, there was a lot of them just had, they needed to be built completely, because it was like a small parcel of land in some tourist destination where they could not open it up in phases. So which means the revenue generation only starts after, let's say, 2 or 3 years, when that project really completes. And again, it's also subject to other factors, like let's say tourists suddenly don't want to go to a particular location for whatever reason, right? So it is subject to those kind of trends as well.
Got it. Okay. And so, in this project, it's building and selling single-family homes to active adults. What made you more comfortable with that approach versus some of the other things you looked at?
Right. So I think like in terms of like demographics, I think a lot of folks are kind of moving towards the Sun Belt, right? And the Rocky River project is like in North Carolina, right, which is part of the Sun Belt. So I see a lot of people moving there, and as I said, I also found that the project is close to like a major city, not too far out, where people cannot, let's say, choose to go to like a city for entertainment or medical services or anything like that. And the project, if you look at the prospectus document, it has like, it's a kind of a self-contained kind of community with a lot of sporting facilities and different, you get access to like your shopping centers are close by. So that was something I was looking for. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Um, in terms of the regional center, I know you were in touch with a number of other regional centers in addition to EB5AN. What would you say, what were the differences that you saw in terms of the regional center, in terms of responsiveness, transparency, access to information? How did that factor into your decision, and what was the scope of experience that you had doing that research?
Big difference, actually. So what I found was anyone who visits EB5AN or has interacted with your team will be able to instantly tell like the amount of detail oriented like documentation, information on the YouTube channel, on the page, the responsiveness of the emails is is really great. I did not see that kind of response. I mean, they were all responsive. When I'm talking about other regional centers, they were all responsive, but I never got that same amount of detail and responsiveness from any of them. In fact, even some of the prospectus documents which were sent seem to be lacking a few details. And I had to kind of ask again for them. And in some cases, they weren't even available, and that's fine. But I think in some cases, they weren't even able to tell when they'd be able to get them. So I found that when I reached out, so even within EB5AN, there were a couple of projects I was looking at. And when I asked your team, I work with Jordan and Dyrang from your team, so they were very responsive. I always got like any question that I had, I was able to communicate through multiple channels like email or WhatsApp and always get a reply back or always have a clarification answered. And in some cases, some of the questions that I asked never even got a reply from other regional centers. That was important to me, and I thought that was a big differentiator, really.
And how, like during that kind of project evaluation period, how important was it for you to, review the financials of the project, and in this case, the Coulter parent company that's providing the repayment guarantee to secure the EB5 investment? What was your experience similar to other regional centers that were willing to provide, all those financial documents so you could really see what the, financial health was of the different companies involved? And, how important was that for you in terms of getting comfortable with a particular project?
Very important. And I think anyone looking to invest in this should also keep that as a very important criteria, right? To make sure that you're reviewing all the documents possible. And, if you see anything missing in terms of financial documentation, make sure to ask the regional center. And as I said, right, some regional centers didn't have that documentation on hand and they weren't able to provide it. So that was like a big differentiator, because EB5AN always got back to me with any of the documentation that I asked. And for people applying with this who are not of a financial who don't have a finance background, it's important that they go through these documents and try to understand like how a particular how the money will flow, right, from, let's say, the structures that are created, the GP LP structure. So it's important to understand that. And you will have questions if you don't have a finance background. You will have questions, and you need someone on hand from the regional center who will be able to answer your questions. So questions about that, questions about the capital stack. And yeah, that was a differentiator because a lot of folks weren't able to answer it in other regional centers.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. In terms of other factors, the regional center obviously is important. The developer, what were some of the other things in your mind that were important when finalizing a project decision?
So for the rural project, I think the reason why I chose rural over urban was the RIA Act of 2022, which says that rural projects get priority processing. I think it's important they want to encourage investment in rural areas to create jobs, which I thought was great. And other macros of the project, like how far is it like from a major city? Who's the target demographic that's kind of moving there? Is it vacationers? Is that older people? Is that tourists or children? Or that was important to me. The other aspect was how are the revenue generation for the project, right? Is it on a rolling basis? Is all the investment required upfront, or like to even build the project, right? So who's funding a majority of the project? Do they have that thing? How long has it been on the market? Because a lot of the EB5 projects have been, maybe they were probably waiting for a couple of years from some other region centers, which they did not have the capital to get started on it, how the bridge financing works. So those are the financial aspects of it, right? And whether the project you're selecting is also going to meet the job creation criteria, right? So these were the factors that were important.
One thing you mentioned there was rolling revenues. Why, like in your opinion, why was that a critical aspect that you wanted to find a project that had that?
Correct. So the reasoning behind this was that when you're putting in like this investment, right? You're after the period of the investment that it's at risk, you also want to kind of get your money back, right? So like the idea is that after a certain amount of period, there has to be some sort of like exit event, right? Which means your project is going to have to, if it's, let's say, a hotel, right? After completion, guests are going to start moving in. That's going to generate revenues, and slowly the investor is kind of getting paid back, right? With rolling revenues, but that requires like an upfront. It has to like you need all the amount to construct the hotel and then kind of do that. But if you're developing in phases, you can put some money, and then when that house gets built, in the case of Rocky River, you can kind of fund the returns through sales of those homes. So you're kind of building up revenue after the first set of homes have been created. So even if it's like a 10-year project, you're already starting your revenue start rolling in every like from the 2-year mark and going forward, right? And you're seeing like that's not the case with some of the other projects.
Got it. Okay, so a little more diversification. Your capital is got to be returned, obviously, from the underlying business success of the project, and so having that not be concentrated in just one event, but in this case, the sale of hundreds of homes over a multi-year period, kind of reduces that risk.
Yeah, great. You summarized it really well. Yeah, I should have said that.
Yep. And also just the fact that these homes are being built individually, right? So it's build one, sell one, build one, sell one. So if things speed up, they build more. If they slow down, they don't build as many. But it doesn't endanger the safety of the project overall.
Yeah.
Which is much harder to manage if it's a single structure, like a large high-rise hotel or apartment building or resort. So.
And just to add there, like let's look at the period, right? Let's say a 2-year period, and let's say you need all the construction and everything upfront, right? Let's say you have to buy all the cement, steel, and all that. If you have to do that, you're kind of taking the risk, right? You're kind of if the price for cement or steel is very high, your returns are also negatively affected by the fact that in that 2-year period you kind of got locked into a higher rate, right? Whereas over a longer period of time, it maybe averages down, right? So you have that, as you said, diversification, not just of like the revenue, but also like your input costs that go into building that project.
Right, exactly. So over time, if material costs increase, then there's the ability to increase the price of the home,
right,
to preserve economics ongoing. Yep, Got it. Okay, perfect. All right. So in summary here, same question we talked about earlier with respect to attorneys, but for other investors in your similar situation in the U.S., born in India on H-1B, what kind of high level advice would you have for those considering doing EB-5 today in terms of, let's say focus this one on project selection?
Right. So I'd say find a good regional center, right? One that can kind of, that can educate you on things that you may not understand about it as you collect more information, right, about the project, because a lot of folks who are on H-1B visas tend to be in the tech sector where they're not as familiar with finance and these aspects, right? So find someone who can kind of help you out with documentation, help you understand these projects, and then start requesting prospectus documents and reviewing them, right? And try to understand how the job creation works, what the capital stack is, what are the criteria that are important to you for the project. I think I've described a few that are universal that you should probably care about, like the job creation and how the revenues are coming in and all that, but you might have your own criteria, right? So take into account all that. And if you have the means, go for it, because I think, as I described earlier, with the tech sector, you never know. It can be layoffs, or you could be in a period where you don't get stamping. So it gives you a level of flexibility that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then lastly, just having gone through the experience recently working with Anita George and EB5AN, would you recommend EB5AN and Anita for other similarly placed investors such as yourself to work with through the process, and high level why?
Yes, I would, because with let me first speak about Anahita, right? I had a great experience working with her. Her process is streamlined. She's very responsive during the process and even after the process, now that I have questions. So, and I have worked with a lot of attorneys and organizations before, right? Large organizations, small organizations, and I did interview a lot of people. So you will find that I found her to be really good, and I would recommend her. And I think even if you look her up, she has great reviews, and I can testify to the fact that she was great. So that's about Anahita. About EB5AN, as I said, very detail oriented, lots of information on the YouTube channel, even on specific parts that investors wouldn't even think that would be a concern. Like, for instance, I think one of the videos that I saw was about the escrow account, right? Where, as an example, when you're transferring your funds, you transfer them to an escrow account, right? And here's where the detail-oriented stuff comes into play. If you remember a few years ago with the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, it turned out that a lot of funds kind of went, there was before the government essentially made the depositors whole, there was that FDIC insurance limit, which, if a lot of investors would have lost their money if only the FDIC insurance, like the 250K, was met. But if you look at EB5AN's documentation, they'll specifically say that, hey, this escrow account is ICS compliant, which means it's cash sweep. So your money is protected because it's not just going into one. Even though you deposit in one account, they're making sure that the escrow partner is using an ICS account. So there's stuff like that, really detail oriented. I worked with Jordan and Dairang. They were both great, and I have an ongoing communication with them as my process continues. And yeah, I think speaking of my interaction with Sam has also been great. So that's why I would yeah, I would recommend EB5AN as well. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the other regional centers, they were kind of lacking in terms of documentation, or the responsiveness wasn't as great. So
Great, thank you. We appreciate you sharing your experience. It's always helpful to have candid feedback from recent investors who've gone through the process, both in terms of source of funds, working with an attorney, and also on the project side. So yeah, we really appreciate it. I personally really appreciate you taking some time and sharing your feedback with us. And yeah, thank you again for the time.
thank you.